The first match was Rin against Connor. Rin opens with Sneasler and Goldango, and Connor sends out Torkoal and Walking Wake. Walking Wake moves first, knocking Goldango down to about half health with sun-boosted Hydro Steam. Sneasler fires back with Dire Claw, paralyzing Walking Wake. Goldango uses Shadow Ball on Torkoal, lowering its special defense, and Torkoal sets up Stealth Rock. Walking Wake switches to Scizor, which is immune to the oncoming Dire Claw. Goldango uses Make It Rain, knocking out Torkoal. Connor switches Rillaboom in, activating Grassy Terrain, while Rin withdraws Goldango to reset its stat drops and sends in an Incineroar. Sneasler protects, and Rillaboom's Grassy Glide does minimal damage to the newly switched in Incineroar. Scizor's Bullet Punch is blocked by Protect, and Connor switches Rillaboom to Zapdos, while Rin's Incineroar fakes out Scizor and Sneasler uses Dire Claw on Zapdos, putting it to sleep. Zapdos switches to Glimmora, but it also falls asleep as a result of another Dire Claw. However, this activates its Toxic Debris ability, meaning Rin has to worry about Stealth Rock and Toxic Spikes on their side of the field. Scizor uses Light Screen and Incineroar parting shots into Goldango. Sneasler's Close Combat puts Scizor into red HP, and Goldango finishes it off with Make It Rain. Connor replaces the fainted Scizor with Rillaboom. Sneasler and Glimmora protect while Rillaboom KOs Goldango with a priority Grassy Glide. Tornadus comes out and attempts to boost Sneasler's attack with Swagger, but it misses, and this causes Sneasler's acrobatics to fall just short of KOing Glimmora. Rillaboom's Grassy Glide does almost half to Sneasler, while Glimmora hits Tornadus with a Sludge Bomb and poisons it. Rillaboom terrestrializes to Grass, and Glimmora protects, but Rin ignores it and launches a super effective acrobatics into Rillaboom. This combined with Bleak Windstorm gets Rillaboom into red HP. Rillaboom finally KOs Sneasler with Grassy Glide. Incineroar replaces Sneasler and fakes out Rillaboom, allowing Tornadus to move first and KO both of Connor's Pokemon with Bleak Windstorm. The next turn, Tornadus sets up Tailwind and Incineroar knocks off Zapdos' Focus Sash, although at this point it's useless. Zapdos takes a sleep turn while Walking Wake fakes out Tornadus with the Dragon Claw. Rin sends out Dragonite and takes out the still sleeping Zapdos on the next turn with priority Extreme Speed. Walking Wake gets its Choice Band knocked off and launches a super effect Dragon Claw into Dragonite, who barely survives. All that Rin has to do now is use Extreme Speed to take the game. The next match was Marcia against KO. KO opens with Chi-Yu and Amoonguss, who face down Marcia's Hatterene and Torkoal. KO terrestrializes Amoonguss to water in order to resist Torkoal's fire moves, while Chi-Yu's Dark Pulse does massive damage to Hatterene. Amoonguss spores Torkoal. Hatterene is barely healthy enough to set up Trick Room, which is crucial to Marcia's strategy. With his job done, Hatterene switches to Ursaluna, and Torkoal gets the one-turn wake-up. The eruption that follows does huge chunks of Chi-Yu and Amoonguss' health, even with the Water Terra. Ursaluna eats Amoonguss' Sludge Bomb, but Chi-Yu's Dark Pulse knocks Torkoal down to red HP. Torkoal and Chi-Yu protect, but Chi-Yu is the only one who gets any value out of it, as Amoonguss hits Ursaluna with another Sludge Bomb, and Ursaluna's Headlong Rush meets Chi-Yu's Protect. Chi-Yu switches to Incineroar, and Amoonguss uses Rage Powder, although it does nothing against Torkoal's Heat Wave. Ursaluna finally KOs Amoonguss with Headlong Rush. Sneasler comes in, and Torkoal switches to Diancie, while Ursaluna protects, blocking Fake Out. Trick Room ends, allowing Sneasler to move first on the following turn. Its Dire Claw puts Diancie to sleep, and Incineroar knocks off Ursaluna's Flame Orb. Ursaluna KOs Incineroar with Headlong Rush. Palafin comes in, and Diancie switches to Hoopa. Ursaluna protects against Dire Claw, and Palafin flip turns into Tornadus. Ursaluna goes down to burn, and Torkoal comes back in, setting up the sun once again. Tornadus' Tailwind allows Sneasler to move first on the next turn and KO Hoopa with Dire Claw. Torkoal goes for Eruption, but it does a tiny amount of damage because of Torkoal's low HP. Indeedee comes in, setting up Psychic Terrain, while Torkoal terrestrializes to Fire. Sneasler's Dire Claw does exactly half to Indeedee, and Bleak Windstorm KOs Torkoal. Marcia sets up her second Trick Room of the game and sends out Diancie to replace Torkoal. Sneasler protects against Dazzling Gleam, and Tornadus' Bleak Windstorm takes a little bit more health from Marcia's Pokemon. Indeedee uses Follow Me, and Diancie finally wakes up, its Diamond Storm KOing Tornadus, while Sneasler's Dire Claw KOs Indeedee. Now it's just Palafin and Sneasler staring down a low HP Hatterene and Diancie. KO tries to play it safe by protecting Sneasler, but this just leaves Palafin wide open to feint against Marcia's Spread move. Chi-Yu comes back in, and 3 Pokemon protect thanks to KO getting the 1 in 3 chance of a double protect on Sneasler. Chi-Yu's Dark Pulse takes out Hatterene on the next turn, and Diancie's Diamond Storm isn't enough to stop Sneasler from ending the game with another Dire Claw. The third match was me against none other than Blake. I sent out my Sneasler and Rillaboom together. Meanwhile, Blake sends out George W. Bush the Gargantical and Uwu the Alolan Ninetales. Garganical protects against Rillaboom's Fake Out, and Ninetales barely survives Dark Claw, allowing it to set up Aurora Veil, although it doesn't escape paralysis. Expecting Ninetales to attack my Rillaboom, I Terrastallize it to fire, but Blake switches Ninetales out to Dequavius III the Incineroar. I protect Sneasler and launch a Woodhammer into Garganical, doing about half of its health. Garganical sets up Stealth Rock. Close Combat does pitiful damage to Incineroar thanks to Aurora Veil, and Woodhammer is blocked by another Protect. Incineroar Parting Shots into Big Guy to Kyurem. Realizing that I need to reset Sneasler's stat drops, I go into a Tornadus, a huge fumble on my part, as it immediately goes down to a super effective Blizzard. Rillaboom U-turns right back into Sneasler, which gets hit by a critical Salt Cure. Rillaboom also comes back in. Garganical protects, but I ignore it and launch Fake Out and Close Combat into Kyurem, taking about half of its health. Blake switches Kyurem into Wall Liver the King Gambit, which immediately goes down to another Close Combat. Woodhammer takes Garganical down to yellow HP and it Salt Cures Rillaboom. No comment, the Landorus comes out, and I switch Sneasler to Raging Bolt. I try to switch Rillaboom with U-turn, but Blake protects both of his Pokemon and it ultimately goes down to residual Salt Cure damage. Sneasler comes back in and finally finishes Garganical off with Close Combat, but it goes down to Earth Power. Dragon Pulse does about half to Landorus. Aurora Veil finally ends as Glimmora and Incineroar come in. Landorus protects, but I ignore it and launch a Power Herb boosted Meteor Beam into Incineroar, KOing it. Kyurem comes back in as I switch Raging Bolt to Ogerpon Wellspring, and Glimmora protects against Earth Power. On the next turn, Ivy Cudgel takes out Landorus. Unfortunately, this is where the game really falls off for me, as Kyurem lands Blizzard on both my Pokemon and freezes Ogerpon. I click Meteor Beam, forgetting that my Power Herb has already been used up. Ninetales comes back in and protects. Ogerpon is frozen solid and Glimmora falls to Blizzard before getting to use its charged up Meteor Beam. Raging Bolt comes back in. Ogerpon is frozen solid again and goes down to Blizzard. Raging Bolt gets frozen by Blizzard, can't move, and is KO'd by another Blizzard, ending the game. Unfortunately, Sam was never able to schedule a match against Jude, which ultimately ended in her forfeiting to him. The next match for next week will be me versus Connor, Sam versus Marsha, Jude versus Rin, and Blake versus KO.